The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Closing Reproducibility and Collaboration Gaps to Drive High-Performance Research. I'm Emily So, a bioinformatic scientist at CodeOcean, and I'm thrilled that you all joined us today. Before we get started, we just have a few housekeeping items. First, this session is being recorded, and we'll send you the recording after the event. Second, just a note that you can adjust your view and zoom in to see the screen larger if you'd like. Finally, we'd love to get some questions from the audience today, so feel free to submit questions anytime throughout the webinar using the chat, and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. I'm delighted to introduce today's speaker, Alicia Liu, who's an application scientist here at CodeOcean. Alicia comes from a background in molecular biology and epigenetics, and has prepared a great presentation for us today on how the adoption of high-throughput collaboration accelerates the speed and performance of bioinformatics and computational research teams. Alicia, thank you so much for joining us, and I'll pass it over to you.
Great, thank you, Emily, for the introduction. I am very excited to show today how CodeOcean can help close researcher gaps to accelerate computational work. So a quick run through of what we'll be discussing today. First, we're going to cover an overview of computational research, then the gaps that we see in reproducibility and collaboration, followed by an introduction to the concept of high throughput collaboration, then a product demo of the CodeOcean platform, and lastly, we'll end with a short Q&A. So here at CodeOcean, our goal is really to empower researchers with the tools to do what they do best. And computational research as a field is growing and changing at such a rapid pace. Computational biology in particular has really made some of the most advanced technological progress that we've ever seen. So this figure attempts to demonstrate some of that progress. It's not just disease models becoming more complex over time, but with the advent of next generation sequencing technology, long read sequencing, single cell technology, just to name a few, the amount of data that is being generated in the field is quickly becoming exponential. As the data continues to get bigger and bigger, analyses also become more complicated. So we're now needing teams of computational researchers working together with biologists to create results and progress. So what we're seeing is that often in these research groups, teams are operating in silos, where different people have different skills, they come from different backgrounds, they use different tools, different pipelines, they may even code in different languages. So you can have bioinformatics for data processing and pipelines, a computational team for modeling, analysis, machine learning, all of them working together with the experimental team for interactive analysis and discovery. And then there's also IT who handles applications and infrastructure. So effortless collaboration between all of these different groups is difficult. And in addition to that, there's also a large ecosystem of languages, tools, packages, applications to know and leverage. And this slide is not meant to be comprehensive by any means, but as new experimental techniques are being discovered and developed, we're seeing more and more computational tools and packages being made to analyze new types of data. And there's really no one size fits all. We're seeing a need for a platform that allows users the flexibility to leverage any open source tool, package, and environment that is available to them. Not only that, but researchers are looking for a way that makes it easy to use, easy to collaborate on, and with computational reproducibility built right in. So that all sounds great, but where are the gaps? So some of the most frequent and common gaps that we're seeing in the research space include not having an out-of-the-box, easy-to-use user environment and research user experience. Being able to share research in a way that is easy and reproducible, and it simply works every time. Third, having a common repository where users and their collaborators can access shared data, shared analyses, and shared results. So these things that we're discussing here, these are researcher to researcher gaps that impact productivity. So think collaboration, think sharing code, perhaps sharing computational analysis with an experimental researcher who may be less familiar with code. And then we also have gaps between the researchers and IT. So these are going to be more DevOps related. So things like tracking changes, versioning code, versioning the computing environment, upgrading tools and packages, and managing all of the dependencies. Things like security and access control, being able to manage your own computational resources. So these gaps that we're discussing here are really a huge DevOps burden for both researchers and IT. And we find that a lot of time is spent on both sides trying to address these issues. So now, before we move on, we're really interested in seeing what our audience thinks of these research gaps. Can you relate to them? Are these gaps and challenges something that you've come across in your experience? So now I'm going to pass it back to Emily for some quick audience polls.
Thank you, Alicia. So we're just going to do a couple of polls to understand the experience of our audience. So the first poll is, which of the following scenarios have you experienced? And you can check all that apply, whether it's reproducibility issues, compute resource issues, dependency issues, or other. You can take the time now to enter in your results. I do see some coming in that are really interesting. I think Alicia will be really interested to discuss these. So it looks like some are coming in. You can check all that apply. You don't have to limit it to one. Okay, I'm going to close the poll now. Thank you so much for all of your feedback. And I'm going to share the results with Alicia.
All right, thank you, Emily. And looks like quite a few folks have encountered most or perhaps even all of these scenarios. So let's see, the highest one is that the environment fails from dependencies or out-of-date packages. This is certainly something that I've experienced on my own. Sometimes packages become out of date when you try to rerun an analysis a certain amount of time later. So that's really interesting that so many people have also experienced this. The second most common one, which also isn't surprising, is that something runs on my machine, but then I send it to a colleague, I send it to a collaborator, and suddenly they're struggling to get it running on their machine as well. Let's see, what else? Time and or resources wasted to recreate prior analyses. Yeah, it looks like these results are certainly very interesting. Glad to, well, sort of glad to see that so many people are kind of experiencing these issues that we pointed out. So let's move on to the second quick poll that we have for our audience.
The next poll that we're going to talk about is, what are your biggest challenges aside from any other prior issues that we discussed, mainly focusing on shareability, traceability, and reproducibility. So feel free to put in your answers now. Some really interesting results coming in. A couple more seconds and we'll let people put in some of their thoughts. Again, you can select your top three. You don't have to limit it to just one issue that you may face. Okay, I'm going to close the poll now. Thank you so much for all of your input. And now I'm going to share the results with Alicia.
Great, thank you, Emily. All right, okay, this is a little surprising that the highest one is sharing research with non-coders and the lowest one is sharing research with fellow coders. That's certainly very interesting, and we're very excited to see that sharing research with non-coders kind of ranked so high here, we've got a great feature that kind of helps out with exactly this. The second highest is full visibility and traceability of a computational project. From personal experience, this one certainly speaks a lot to me. I remember, when working on a computational project and trying to trace back all of the steps that I did, what parameters I used. So certainly having full traceability of a complicated research project, really excited to see that this is one of the biggest challenges for many folks in our audience. So wonderful. Thank you everyone in the audience for participating in this. All right, so moving on. We've discussed quite a bit about the gaps in the computational research space, and it certainly seems that many of them are not unfamiliar to most of us in the audience. Now I'd like to move on to how the CodeOcean platform really attempts to close some of these gaps. So I'm going to take this time to address the idea of high-throughput collaboration, or HTC, as a solution to the problems that we've been discussing. So adopting high-throughput collaboration through CodeOcean makes the research, and that is the code, the data, the environment, the results, truly the entirety of the computational analysis. It makes it easy to share, easy to trace, and fully reproducible with the click of a button. So you're going to have full transparency of the entire lifetime of a computational project. So no matter how much time has passed, no matter if the researcher involved is no longer at the organization, high throughput collaboration really ensures that results generated will always be traceable and reproducible. Because here at CodeOcean, high throughput collaboration is kind of our answer to the gaps in collaboration and reproducibility. Powerful and seamless collaboration means that you can create research instantly. So you have your tools, your packages, your IDEs, your computing resources, even your data all in one place. So you will be able to seamlessly share and collaborate, reproduce, and reuse. And ultimately, this means that you're not going to be reinventing the wheel anymore. Computational analyses just work, and you get to leave the DevOps behind. So our goal is to make computational research faster, to make it more efficient, more collaborative. We really want to empower researchers with the tools to do what they do best, to focus on the research and make higher quality discoveries with high throughput collaboration using the CodeOcean platform. So what exactly does this all look like? We have two major parts to the CodeOcean Enterprise platform. This is a cloud-based service which is deployed into the client's secure VPC and accessed through a web browser. So the first part of it is going to be an organized computational workbench. So here you're going to have all of the tools to perform the research. You can work with anything that is open source, any tool, any package. You can code in any language, analyze data of any size, using any of the AWS cloud resources that are available to you. And the second part of it is what we call asset management. So this is a centralized repository where you can store and share data sets and results. So altogether, we've created a seamless research user experience with integrated DevOps, integrated version control, full traceability, and reproducibility built right in. And of course, everything that I've mentioned so far is powered by the wonderful CodeOcean Compute Capsule. So the Compute Capsule contains what we call the essential triplet of any computational analysis. So it contains the code, the data, and the computing environment in a single executable package. And having these three be distinct, but also held together and executable, that is really the key advantage. So these compute capsules really encompass what we see as best practices in computational research. We make a point to separate the code, the data, and the environment. So in CodeOcean, the environment is built with Docker, with pinned versions for reproducibility. So this is really optimized for day-to-day work. In many scenarios, once the environment has been built and it's up and running, the environment isn't going to change. When the code changes and when the data changes, it doesn't affect the environment. And once that Docker image has been built using CodeOcean, you'll be able to use it again and again without needing to build it from scratch every time or worry about packages no longer being supported over time. And the other fundamental technology for reproducibility that CodeOcean is built on is Git for version control. So Git is inherently built right into the platform. You'll be able to track changes, view commit history, use different branches, and more. So version control is really, really essential when it comes to collaboration and reproducibility. So going back to these capsules, you can imagine that you might have a repository of them, many, many different projects, and with the click of a button, you can reproduce the original results. You can also use capsules as templates, meaning that you can clone a capsule and then change the content inside. For example, keeping the environment and the code the same and simply changing out the data set, or perhaps keeping the environment and the data set the same and then making changes to the code. So this really allows you to build new results on top of previous work without starting over from scratch. All capsules and their associated results can be versioned, they are traceable, and they are reproducible. So now I am going to move on to a product demo of the CodeOcean platform that really highlights high-throughput collaboration. And just a quick reminder to our audience, if you have questions at any time throughout the presentation, please feel free to put them in the question box. All right, so starting out our product demo of the CodeOcean platform, what we're seeing right now is my capsule dashboard. So this is the first thing I'm going to see when I log into my CodeOcean account. Here we have a list of my organized projects, and we can hover over the information icon to see metadata associated with each capsule, including the title, authors, description, and tags. So I'm going to go ahead and open up one of these capsules. This one in particular is for 10x single-cell RNA-seq analysis using Cell Ranger and an R package called Surat. So immediately we can see that there are three main panels within this capsule. On the very left-hand side, we have the organization of our research assets. So as I mentioned, CodeOcean really emphasizes the separation of code, data, and environment, and that is exactly what we're seeing here. So we have our data folder, which also has a nice, easy link to CodeOcean's asset repository, which makes it really, really easy to attach data sets to your capsule. And using this asset repository, there is no format limit to the type of file or the size of data that you can add. It's really quite limitless in this way. And then we also have our code folder. That's pretty self-explanatory. And then third, we have our computing environment, which is based on Docker. And it comes with this really nice UI for you to select a starter environment and choose packages to populate your environment. And I will go into more of that in just a moment. Next, I would like to bring your attention to the panel on the right-hand side. So at the very top here, we have ways to launch a computation in CodeOcean. So the first being reproducible run, and the second being to launch a cloud workstation, such as Jupyter Lab, RStudio, MATLAB, etc. And right below that, we have our capsule timeline. So this timeline is going to show the full history of the compute capsule. So starting from the very bottom, you're going to see the run history. So for example, this is the very first run that we did on this capsule. Note that we have not only the results, but we also have the amount of time that the computation took. We also have performance metrics, as well as the output of the run itself. Beyond that, the timeline is going to have the full commit history. If a capsule has been published or internally released, that's going to be here as well. Every captured result is going to be here. So every run, every RStudio session, etc. And something that I really want to emphasize is how Git is just kind of built right into the platform. So let me demonstrate that by taking a file and making a change to it. So we'll say hello code ocean. And just like that, on the right-hand side in the timeline, it's now telling me that I have one uncommitted change. So let's go ahead and view that change. Of course, it is the change in the run file. So I can decide to either commit changes right in the UI here, or what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to discard these changes. And just like that, my capsule has gone back to the way it was before. So just like that, you'll always be able to track changes to a capsule. And we do recommend committing changes after each successful run. This really helps to ensure reproducibility of all of your results. And everything that I'm showing really allows multiple users to work together easily on a capsule. And let me show you what that looks like. So if we look at this little icon to the left of the capsule name, it says private, and this means that I am currently the only person who has access to this capsule. Now I'm going to click the share button, and I'm going to add my colleague Emily to this capsule, and I can do so with permissions. So I can add her as either just a viewer of the capsule, I can add her as an editor, or also as a fellow owner of the capsule. So I'm going to give Emily editor permissions. And now my icon has changed from private to shared. So just like that, Emily can now see my capsule. She can view files, she can make changes, run code, generate results, and everything that she does is going to be captured within the timeline. So she can come to this capsule, click reproducible run, and so long as no changes were made, she will be able to reproduce my latest results. And this is, again, because the code, the data, the computing environment has already been created. So everything is set up and ready to go for her. In fact, the Docker image doesn't even need to be rebuilt every time this capsule is run. So it doesn't matter how much time has passed, it doesn't matter who the original user was, as long as best practices are followed in regard to version control, committing your changes, results will always be reproducible. So next, I'm going to show how capsules also allow for easy duplication with the click of a button. So let me demonstrate. In our capsule dropdown here, I'm going to click duplicate. And in just a few seconds, we are going to see a brand new capsule. Here it is, with a clear timeline. And there is one uncommitted change. That's this little yellow icon here in the metadata. And the only change is the name of the capsule, which now is a copy of the original. Notice that this is a new private capsule. Again, I am the only person with access to this. So I'm just going to go ahead and quickly commit these changes. So let's take a look at our research assets again. So the code and the data are the same as before. The computing environment, as well as our Docker file, are the same as before. And so long as no changes are made to the environment, I can still use the same Docker image from the original capsule, which means that there's no need to wait for the environment to build, which also means that the environment will never break. And now I'd like to quickly demonstrate how easy it is to build your environment in CodeOcean. So I'm going to go ahead, on the left-hand side here, we're seeing our environment UI, and on the right-hand side, we're seeing our Docker file. So let's go ahead and add an R package. We'll just add Plotly to this. I'm going to click the checkbox, and just like that, my Docker file has automatically updated to include the Plotly package. So what we're seeing is that there is no need to struggle with Docker. There's no need to learn Docker syntax. You simply put in your package name, package version number into this nice UI, and the platform does it all for you. And if I bring up my timeline again, we can see that it is now telling me, of course, that I have one uncommitted change in my Docker file. That is, of course, the Plotly package that I added. Again, we can commit changes in the UI, or I'm going to go ahead and discard all changes. And just like that, my Docker file has reverted. Plotly is no longer in my environment. So now I think we are ready to run some computation. So let's start by selecting our computing resources. So right here on the same environment UI, we have our compute resource manager. So we can choose the number of resources from a standard flex machine, or we can select a dedicated machine from a full list of available Amazon EC2 instances that are available to you. So let's actually just stick with the lowest default. Now, for your day-to-day ongoing exploratory analysis, you're probably going to want to do most of your work in a cloud workstation. So I'm going to go ahead and launch our studio. And this is going to be the same IDE that you're already familiar with outside of CodeOcean. Nothing here about this is proprietary. This is really the same RStudio that you've probably seen before. So here you'll be able to edit your code, you'll be able to run your code, you'll be able to generate results, save results, etc. We even have Git functionality built right into this RStudio. And then the last thing that I wanted to demonstrate is how capsules can be internally released to be used as templates by your colleagues and your fellow collaborators. So I'm going to go back to our dashboard, and I'm going to bring us to the Explore page where we have a list of such capsules. So capsules that are released can have multiple versions, and I'm going to open one of these up. So here we can see in the timeline that this published capsule has version 2.0 as well as version 1.0. So each different version can have changes to the code, the data, the environment, and we can very easily switch between versions with the click of a button. So just like I'm demonstrating now, switch to version 1.0, and now I can switch back to version 2.0. So this kind of acts as taking a snapshot of a research project, and you can kind of jump around however you want and always reproduce old results. Any published capsule as well can be duplicated. Just as I showed earlier, it can be duplicated for further downstream analysis. And this particular published capsule demonstrates our very nice and convenient app panel for no code analysis. So this particular feature is really more geared towards working with collaborators who may be less familiar with code, so that these collaborators can run computations, they can generate results, they can generate interactive figures, all very easily and without needing to even interact with the code in any way. The app panel is really, really quick and easy to use. And based on the results of the second poll that we saw, I think this might be a feature that would be very interesting to many of us in the audience. So with that, that concludes our very brief product demo showing how CodeOcean can help close gaps, research gaps in reproducibility and collaboration. So I can promise that there are many more exciting features that we were not able to fit into today's webinar, but now I would like to conclude with some key productivity benefits that really demonstrate the value of working with CodeOcean capsules. So for our bioinformatic scientists and our computational users, we have a complete, efficient UX for high-throughput collaboration. To collaborate with experimental researchers, analyses and results can be easily shared on the same platform. We also have tools like the app panel that allow scientists who are less familiar with code to still run analyses, generate results and figures without needing to interact with the code in any way. And then from an IT perspective, capsules really help to automate DevOps. So things like setting up your computing environment, security and access, built-in version control. Capsules really help to ensure computational reproducibility and overall reduce time and resources wasted trying to get old code up and running again, trying to reproduce old results, reinventing the wheel. So altogether, adopting high-throughput collaboration with CodeOcean means more efficient collaboration and better traceability and reproducibility of your computational work. And with that, we're going to start to wrap things up. And now I'm going to pass it back to Emily.
Thank you so much, Alicia, for a great presentation. As a reminder, you can now submit questions through the chat or through the questions box, and we can get to as many as we can. I do see a few questions coming in, so maybe I can just pass them to Alicia to answer. The first question is, how does CodeOcean support the addition of new data? Is there a file type or data size limit for adding your own data?
That's a great question. Thank you, Emily. So CodeOcean really supports all file types. There's no limit to the format of the data that you can add to the platform, and there's certainly no limit to the file size or size of the given data set. So using our asset repository, there's really no limit to the kind of data or how much data you can store. Really, the limit is how much you want to pay AWS in cloud storage. But there are some additional benefits to using our asset repository for data, namely being able to share data sets across multiple capsules and users, as well as certain performance benefits depending on how it's used.
Another question coming in is, how do you handle parallel processing of jobs while using a service like AWS Batch?
That's a great question, and it's something that has certainly come up before. We do get a lot of requests for parallel processing on CodeOcean, and it is certainly something that is doable using a service like AWS Batch. And AWS Batch is just one option. There are many other options available for parallel computing on the cloud, but essentially the short of it is that you can use AWS Batch in a capsule, same as you would use AWS Batch outside of CodeOcean.
Correct. And just a reminder as well for that question to add on, we do have GPU resources available as compute options in CodeOcean as well. Maybe one more question is, what is the benefit of starting my work on CodeOcean versus just moving all my code there at the end? Could you name maybe some benefits to that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So starting your work on CodeOcean, certainly the benefits are through collaboration. The code could possibly already be there, right? So let's say a colleague shares a capsule with you, or there's a template capsule that you can duplicate. It's a very quick and easy process for you to get started right away with your computational work. Alternatively, if you have sort of a completed project outside of CodeOcean, you can go ahead and import everything in. You can get it running inside of CodeOcean, and you get the same benefits that we've been talking about. So your work is forever reproducible, traceable, and now you've got a really nice, easy, simple capsule that you can then share with your colleagues and collaborators.
One more question is, what happens if a version of my package changes that's inside my capsule? How will my capsule be affected?
So because the Docker image, it has already been built, even if, say, a package manager kind of upgrades the package, you'll always be able to use that same Docker image that has already been created. Now, if you choose to manually update any of your packages, there could be issues with dependencies, and that's something that you'll have to kind of figure out inside of CodeOcean, same as outside of CodeOcean. But the one of the main benefits is that once your Docker image for your environment has been created, you'll be able to use it again and again without worrying about one of your packages being out of date or no longer being supported.
That's correct. Amazing answer. Thank you so much. Thank you, Alicia, for your talk today, and thank you to everyone for attending today's webinar. If you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We have some resources here if you are interested about a CodeOcean Compute Capsule, or like I mentioned, you have any more questions, there's some contact info here. And you will also receive an email with the recording of today's webinar for your reference. And on behalf of CodeOcean and our presenters, we want to thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.